10 new laws have slipped quietly through Parliament. No headlines, no debate, yet each one will reach into your daily life, from your money and healthcare to your freedom online. Most people won't notice until it's too late. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see how every single one of these hidden laws could affect you. Number 1. Digital ID expansion. The quiet introduction of a nationwide digital ID system has already begun to reshape how British citizens interact with public and private services. Under this law, access to healthcare, banking, travel, and even basic government services could soon require a single digital profile linked to personal data. While officials present it as a step toward efficiency, many people remain unaware of how deeply it will affect their everyday lives. For example, visiting a GP, applying for benefits, or even renewing a driver's license may no longer be possible without this digital verification, making it almost impossible to live outside the system. Those without smartphones or internet literacy, especially older citizens, risk being quietly excluded from daily essentials. The debate around this law is not only about technology, but also about privacy and control. Once all data is centralized, the possibility of surveillance grows stronger. Purchases, medical records, and travel history could be automatically logged under one system, creating a detailed map of individual behavior. Authorities argue that it helps to fight fraud and streamline services, yet critics warn that errors or technical failures could leave citizens locked out of vital access. Imagine being wrongly flagged and suddenly unable to access your pension payments or medical appointments. For millions of people, especially those living on the edge, such disruptions could be devastating. Another layer of concern lies in economic inequality. While tech-savvy individuals may adapt quickly, rural residents, low-income families, and seniors may struggle to keep up with mandatory digital requirements. Setting up an account, remembering logins, or updating devices can be a challenge when resources are limited. The risk is that society begins to divide between those who can fully engage with this system and those who cannot. Many citizens may not even realize the change until they arrive at a hospital desk or government office and are told that a digital ID is required. By then, it will already be too late to question how silently this law has altered the foundations of everyday life, leaving many to feel both vulnerable and voiceless in their own country. Number 2. Cashless society push. A second silent shift taking place across Britain is the slow push toward a cashless society. While framed as modernization, the reality is that new laws are quietly limiting the use of physical money. Businesses are being given more freedom to refuse cash payments, while large cash transactions are being heavily scrutinized and in some cases restricted. On the surface, these changes may seem like small adjustments to financial policy, but their effect on daily life is immense. For example, elderly citizens accustomed to paying bills in person or withdrawing money weekly from the post office are finding fewer places that still accept cash. Even small shops in rural towns are beginning to phase out coins and notes, leaving whole communities dependent on cards or apps they may not be comfortable using. The official reasoning behind this cashless drive is framed around security and efficiency. Authorities argue that digital payments make it easier to track fraud, prevent money laundering, and streamline taxation. Yet, for ordinary citizens, this system comes with hidden consequences. Every card swipe or app transfer leaves a traceable record, meaning privacy in financial transactions becomes almost impossible. Imagine paying for a private medical service or sending discreet support to a struggling relative. Those transactions are no longer just between individuals, but recorded within a system, accessible to multiple institutions. Moreover, technical outages or cyber attacks could instantly leave people unable to buy groceries, pay for transport, or access emergency funds. What is presented as convenience could easily become vulnerability. The social divide created by these changes is perhaps the most concerning aspect. Many pensioners, low-income households, and people in rural areas rely heavily on cash, not out of choice but necessity. For them, digital payments mean navigating smartphones, remembering passwords, and trusting systems they do not fully understand. Once cash is no longer accepted, these groups face the prospect of exclusion from everyday life. The quiet erosion of choice, being told how to pay rather than deciding for oneself, strikes at the heart of personal freedom. While this law is rarely discussed openly, its impact will be felt in every shop, cafe and community hall, where paying with notes and coins may soon be treated as a relic of the past. Number 3. New NHS data sharing rules. A third law that has slipped under the radar involves patient data sharing within the NHS. On paper, it has been described as a measure to improve efficiency and reduce costs by allowing health information to flow more freely between hospitals, GP surgeries, and even private contractors. Yet buried within the legislation is the permission for private companies, including insurers and pharmaceutical firms, to access large amounts of anonymized medical data. For most citizens, this was never explained clearly. Few realize that their personal records, everything from prescription history to hospital visits, may already be stored in databases accessible to organizations outside the NHS. The result is a profound change in how medical privacy, once considered untouchable, is now treated as a resource for economic use. While supporters claim this reform will help drive medical research and improve treatment options, critics highlight the risks of such centralization. Once personal details are linked and shared across platforms, errors can multiply quickly. Imagine being denied life insurance because of a mislabeled record, or having your prescriptions delayed because your digital file was flagged incorrectly. The public is rarely given the chance to opt out, and even when options exist, the process is hidden behind complex forms that most people never complete. This leaves millions exposed to outcomes they neither asked for nor consented to. Moreover, sensitive data in the hands of third parties raises questions of misuse, whether through targeted advertising, higher premiums, or the quiet profiling of vulnerable groups. The most pressing concern is the erosion of trust between citizens and the healthcare system. Patients may begin withholding details from their doctors out of fear that their information will be shared beyond the consultation room. Such hesitancy can have dangerous consequences for diagnoses and treatment outcomes. For the elderly, who already struggle with digital barriers, the fear of losing privacy may further discourage them from seeking help. What was once seen as a sacred bond of confidentiality has been replaced with bureaucratic systems and silent agreements made far from public debate. This law has not only changed the way health data is stored, it has changed the way citizens view the very institution built to protect their well-being. Number 4. Housing and rent caps repeal. One of the most pressing silent changes in Britain is the rollback of rent controls and tenant protections. While this law has not been loudly debated in public, its consequences are already rippling through the housing market. Landlords have been given wider freedom to increase rents, and local councils have lost much of their power to enforce caps or stabilisation measures. For families and pensioners renting their homes, this means monthly costs that were once predictable can now rise sharply with little warning. Those living in cities like London, Manchester, or Birmingham are already reporting increases that outpace wages or pensions, forcing many to consider relocation or even the possibility of homelessness. Behind the official language of market flexibility lies a harsh reality. Vulnerable groups are left exposed. Younger workers, low-income families, and retirees relying on fixed pensions cannot keep up with sudden rent hikes. Even modest increases, say £50 to £100 per month, can wipe out food budgets or savings meant for emergencies. In many cases, tenants find themselves pressured into shorter leases, with landlords preferring frequent renewals to reset rental prices. For those who challenge the increases, legal protections have been weakened, leaving the burden of lengthy disputes squarely on the shoulders of tenants, who often lack the resources to fight. The result is a system tilted in favour of property owners, while renters are left with fewer rights than before. The long-term impact of this repeal could reshape entire communities. Once stable neighbourhoods risk becoming transient zones as long-term tenants are priced out. Families forced to move repeatedly will find it harder to keep children in the same schools, while seniors may be uprooted from the communities they have lived in for decades. The silent repeal of these protections was not presented as a major reform, yet it touches the most basic human need, a secure place to live. Without strong safeguards, the housing market becomes not just expensive, but unpredictable, leaving millions at the mercy of rising rent. For a nation already struggling with affordability, this law represents a quiet but devastating shift in the balance between citizens and the housing system meant to shelter them. Number 5. Workplace pension, auto access. Another law that has passed quietly is the automatic access to workplace pensions for emergency use. On the surface, it appears to give workers more flexibility by allowing them to withdraw a portion of their savings before retirement. Government statements present it as a lifeline for families struggling with sudden financial shocks, such as medical bills, debt repayment, or rising living costs. Yet the detail buried in this legislation reveals a far more troubling reality. Once individuals begin tapping into these funds early, their long-term security is immediately compromised. What feels like short-term relief can quietly snowball into decades of financial strain, leaving many citizens vulnerable in their later years. The design of the policy creates a false sense of safety. By allowing partial withdrawals, the law encourages people to rely on pensions as if they were ordinary savings accounts. However, pensions are carefully built to grow over decades, with compounding interest playing a critical role in ensuring stability during retirement. Even small early withdrawals can slash future payouts by thousands of pounds. For younger workers, this may mean retiring years later than planned. For older workers, especially those nearing retirement, one emergency withdrawal may permanently reduce their income, leaving them unable to cover housing, healthcare, or basic living expenses. This shift in policy effectively transfers the burden of financial risk from the state onto individuals, who often make such decisions without full awareness of the long-term consequences. The broader effect is a slow erosion of retirement security across society. Employers may see reduced pressure to provide strong pension contributions, knowing that workers are shouldering greater responsibility for their financial futures. Banks and private lenders may even push people toward using pensions as collateral, creating further risk. For ordinary citizens, especially those already struggling with rising costs of living, the temptation to dip into pensions will be strong, but the consequences may not be felt until it is too late. What was once designed as a protected foundation for old age is now quietly being rebranded as a tool for immediate survival. This law, passed with little attention, may one day be remembered as the moment Britain's retirement safety net began to unravel. Number 6. Immigration enforcement data laws. Another quiet, yet far-reaching law is the expansion of data-sharing powers for immigration enforcement. Banks, employers, and even landlords are now required to report irregularities in documents or accounts directly to the Home Office. While framed as a way to identify and remove undocumented migrants, the reality is far more complex. Ordinary residents with perfectly legal status may find themselves flagged due to simple clerical errors, name mismatches, or outdated records. Imagine receiving a letter that your bank account has been frozen or your tenancy questioned, not because you did anything wrong, but because your details were misread in a database. Such laws shift the responsibility of enforcement away from government agencies and onto everyday institutions, making ordinary interactions with banks or landlords feel like immigration checks. The law also broadens the scope of financial surveillance. Banks are required to monitor accounts for suspicious activity and to report individuals they believe may lack legal status. This creates a chilling environment in which even long-term residents or British citizens of migrant backgrounds feel under constant scrutiny. A mistyped birth date or a delay in updating visa information could result in serious disruptions, from frozen wages to denied housing applications. For many families, this adds a layer of insecurity to daily life, where simple activities like opening an account or applying for a rental contract become potential risks. Critics warn that such systems encourage discrimination, as institutions may take a better safe than sorry approach, disproportionately affecting minorities and vulnerable groups. Beyond the immediate impact, the deeper concern is how this law redefines citizenship and belonging. By outsourcing immigration checks to financial and social systems, it creates a society where proof of status must be constantly demonstrated. People begin to live under the assumption that they must always be ready to justify their right to exist in the country. For migrants who have contributed for decades, or even those born in Britain but with foreign-sounding names, the sense of being under suspicion becomes part of daily life. Passed quietly, without public debate, this law is not just about enforcement. It is about embedding surveillance into the very fabric of society, altering the relationship between the state and its people. Number 7. Green energy levy expansion. A lesser-known law affecting households across Britain is the quiet expansion of the green energy levy. Officially presented as a necessary contribution to fund renewable energy projects and reduce carbon emissions, the levy has been added directly to energy bills without much public discussion. For many families, this appears simply as another unexplained rise in monthly costs. At a time when energy prices are already at historic highs, even modest increases push vulnerable households closer to financial strain. Pensioners living on fixed incomes, single parents, and low-wage workers are among those who feel the burden most, often having to choose between heating their homes and paying for other essentials. What is described as a step towards sustainability becomes in practice another hidden tax on ordinary people. The core issue lies in how the levy is structured and explained. While government representatives emphasize its importance in meeting climate goals, few citizens are given clear breakdowns of where the money goes. Questions remain over whether these funds are truly being channeled into clean energy development, or whether they are simply covering budget shortfalls elsewhere. The lack of transparency fuels distrust, and households struggling with soaring bills rarely see tangible benefits from their contributions. At the same time, large corporations often receive subsidies or tax relief for adopting green practices, while ordinary consumers shoulder the direct financial impact. This imbalance creates the perception that climate responsibility is being shifted downward onto those least able to afford it. The broader concern is how this levy reshapes the conversation around climate policy and fairness. Citizens support renewable energy in principle, but when the cost falls disproportionately on those already in crisis, public confidence erodes. Families cutting back on essentials may begin to view environmental initiatives not as shared progress, but as elite-driven policies that demand sacrifices from the poor while sparing the wealthy. This risks creating social resistance to future climate measures, even those urgently needed. By passing such a law quietly, the government avoids immediate backlash, yet the long-term effect may be growing resentment among ordinary people who feel they are paying for policies they neither voted for nor fully understood. Number 8. Online speech regulations. Another law passed with little attention is the tightening of online speech regulations under the framework of the so-called Online Safety Bill. The stated goal is to reduce harmful content such as harassment, extremism, or misinformation. While these intentions sound reasonable, the actual scope of the law extends much further than most people realize. Social media platforms are now required to monitor content more aggressively, removing posts that might be deemed harmful or likely to cause distress, even if they are not illegal. This creates a wide grey area where ordinary citizens may see their posts taken down simply because algorithms or moderators interpret them as inappropriate. Without a clear definition of what qualifies as harmful, the law effectively hands over broad control of online speech to both government regulators and private tech companies. For everyday users, this law means that freedom of expression online is narrowing. Political opinions, critical commentary, or even strong personal views could be restricted under the guise of safety. Those running blogs, discussion groups, or independent news pages are particularly vulnerable, as stricter rules may limit their ability to question policies or share controversial ideas. The penalties for platforms that fail to comply, hefty fines, ensure that companies will err on the side of over-censorship, removing content that might otherwise have sparked important debates. For ordinary citizens, the result is a quieter, less diverse internet, where challenging perspectives are gradually filtered out. The chilling effect may discourage people from speaking openly, fearing that a wrong word could see their account suspended or silenced. The broader effect is a shift in how society interacts with information. By expanding government oversight and corporate control of online content, this law transforms the internet from an open forum into a regulated space, where expression is carefully monitored. Younger generations, who rely heavily on online platforms for news and discussion, may never know the difference between authentic free exchange and moderated narratives. Older citizens may feel confused when long familiar pages suddenly disappear, or their comments are flagged without explanation. Passed quietly and framed as protection, this law represents one of the most significant changes to civil liberties in the digital age, altering how Britons communicate, share, and even think online. Number 9. Council tax restructuring. A significant but little publicized law involves the restructuring of council tax bands. On the surface, this reform was presented as a technical update to reflect modern property values. In reality, it has meant that many households have quietly been moved into higher tax brackets without any meaningful public discussion. Families who have lived in the same homes for decades are suddenly paying hundreds of pounds more each year, often without understanding why. The changes are buried in local authority notices or technical documents that most citizens never read, leaving them shocked when bills arrive. For pensioners, low-income earners, and households already stretched thin, even a modest rise in council tax can tip budgets into crisis. The real issue is not only the increase itself, but the lack of clarity and fairness in how these changes are applied. Property values in certain areas have been reassessed upward, while in others, they remain unchanged, creating a sense of regional inequality. Homeowners and tenants alike feel the pressure, since landlords often pass the added costs directly onto renters. In many communities, the rises have arrived at the same time as declining local services, making people question what they are actually paying for. Roads, libraries, and waste collection are still underfunded, yet households are contributing more than ever. This disconnect feeds frustration as citizens perceive the system as less about supporting communities and more about quietly extracting revenue. The broader implications stretch beyond household budgets. Rising council tax contributes to a sense of erosion in community stability, with families forced to move from areas where they once felt secure. For younger couples trying to buy or rent, higher taxes compound the already difficult task of saving for a home. For retirees, unexpected annual increases cut into fixed pensions, leaving them with fewer choices in managing their lives. Because the law was passed without major debate, most people never had the chance to question its fairness or demand protections. Instead, they are left to absorb the cost silently, watching as their contributions grow, while their trust in the system weakens. What seems like an administrative adjustment, in practice, a reshaping of financial responsibilities that will be felt by nearly every household in Britain. Number 10. Eldercare Contribution Law. The final silent law with deep consequences is the change to eldercare contributions. Under this reform, seniors must now use a greater share of their personal savings and assets before qualifying for state-funded care. Previously, thresholds allowed many elderly citizens to protect a portion of their life savings or pass them on to family members. Now these protections have been reduced, meaning that the cost of nursing homes, assisted living, or long-term medical support will fall more heavily on individuals rather than the state. For many families, the reality of this law only becomes clear when a loved one suddenly requires care, at which point bills arrive that can quickly drain decades of savings. The consequences are most severe for middle-income families, who are not wealthy enough to absorb high costs, yet not poor enough to qualify for full support. A lifetime of work, mortgage repayments, and careful saving can vanish within a few years of care home fees. Properties may need to be sold, leaving children unable to inherit the family home. The sense of security many elderly citizens once had, that their contributions to society would guarantee them dignity in old age, is now eroding. These rules also create emotional strain, as families face difficult choices about whether they can afford the best care or must settle for more limited options. For seniors who spent decades planning for retirement, this shift feels like a betrayal. Beyond individual hardship, the broader impact is a reshaping of intergenerational wealth in Britain. As savings are consumed by care costs, fewer assets will be passed down to younger generations, widening the gap between families with inherited wealth and those without. This fuels inequality and undermines the belief that hard work guarantees stability. At the same time, the care sector itself remains underfunded, leaving many to wonder where the additional money is truly going. Passed quietly, without widespread debate, this law transforms aging from a shared social responsibility into a personal financial burden. For millions, the discovery of its implications will come, not through headlines, but through the painful moment of realizing that their life savings are no longer safe from the hidden costs of growing old. The 10 laws we've uncovered today may not have made front-page news, but their effects are already weaving quietly into everyday life. From the expansion of digital IDs and cashless payments to new rules on housing, pensions, and elder care, each measure chips away at the routines and securities people once took for granted. These aren't abstract policies, They are decisions that will determine how families pay their bills, how seniors are cared for, and how freely citizens can speak and move in the years ahead. What makes them even more striking is the way they were introduced, quietly, often buried in technical language, without open debate that would allow ordinary people to fully understand or challenge them. That silence is perhaps the greatest danger, because it leaves millions unprepared for the reality of what is already changing around them. Awareness is the first step. By recognizing how these laws touch healthcare, housing, finance, and freedom, citizens can begin to demand greater transparency and accountability. While the laws may already be on the books, how they are implemented and challenged will depend on how informed and engaged the public chooses to be.